Now the carts, like I said, it depends on what you want to do with your draft work. Not everyone wants to enter a test. Some people just might want to do it for fun, go to a children's school and give rides, be in a town parade, something like that. So it depends what you want your cart for, but there are some principal parts of fit for the cart as well that are important no matter what the apparatus is. Nemo, you can sit now. Nemo, hey, you can sit now. Good boy, good boy. The important things on the cart are that when it's hooked up to the dog, when these are through those brake loops, that these shafts are parallel with the ground. If they're too high, they're kind of pulling the harness up away from the dog's body, and if they're too low, then any weight you put in the cart is going to bear down on the strap across the dog's shoulders. It's going to add weight to the dog. You want the shafts to be parallel to the ground. You also want to know where your point of balance will be on your cart. Depending where the axle is on the cart, the weight of the shafts, you have to kind of find where the best balance point is. You can't just put something anywhere in the cart and expect it to be balanced. When there's no weight in this cart, I've got weight in there, when there's no weight in this cart, you should be able to really play with these shafts and not really get a lot of extra weight. If that weight were to be pushed back, the shafts would come up higher. If the weight were pulled forward, the weight would be bearing down on the dog's shoulders because it would make it front heavy and the shafts would go down. So when you put something in the cart, you always want to move it around and find a nice balance so that these shafts feel like this, whether the cart's empty or with your weight in it. If it's properly balanced, it will feel the same as it does when it's empty. So it's important to do that. The placement of these brakes, like I say, I have this type of brake. You can see that cart just has a round brake. This one has several holes because I've used it for several type dogs. You can't always take the same cart and harness and use it on this dog and that dog and that dog and that dog because they do fit differently. This cart, because it has really tall wheels, can't be used on a short dog because unless you put shorter wheels on it, because it's high up off the ground, and to have these shafts parallel to the ground, it's pretty high. If you put a dog her size in it, they'd be pointing down like this on her, so it wouldn't be fitting properly. But like I said, you could get smaller tires for this, and then you could make it fit a smaller dog. Same with the brakes. You need to move them back and forth up the shaft depending on the length of the dog. And the reason being, you want right here, the front of the shaft, you want that to be even with the point of the shoulder on the front of the dog. Come here, please. Come here. No, right here. Stop. Right here, the shoulder, you can feel the point of the shoulder here. That's where you want the front of the shaft to end. So you put the dog in and you put the shaft there, right to the front, and then you put these traces onto the harness, tighten them up so that the shaft is right at the front of the dog. Then you want to adjust the brake on the shaft so that it's nice and straight up and down from the dog where these brake loops hang. It'll be just nice straight up and down with the shaft at the front of the shoulder. Now I can show you with him in it. Come around and step in. Good boy. Stop. Good boy. Good boy. That was clicker training. You can teach them anything once they're clicker trained. Yeah, that was.
Step in, and he did.
He didn't tend to like the idea of the cart coming up at him from behind. Most people will sit the dog and bring the cart up from behind and just bring the shafts up to the side of them. And he never really liked that. So I saw someone teach that once, and I said, well, that would be good for him because he doesn't, that way he's in the shafts, you just lift them up and he doesn't have it coming at him from behind. Huh, doing all right? Yeah, okay, stand up and stop. Good. Now you can see here's the front of his shoulder, and that's where the shaft is ending. Now what you want to do is you want the shaft ending there when there's pull. So when they're standing here, you're going to want to push back. Stand up, I know. You're going to want to push back a little bit to tighten this up and see what it would be like, you know, if the cart was actually being pulled back a little bit because it had weight in it. Up, 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 up. So this comes right to the front of his shoulder. Now with this to the front of his shoulder, at the same point that's at the front of his shoulder, These traces should be adjusted nice and snug. You don't want any slack in them. You want them nice and snug. You want to put them in like a tight little box within these shafts. So when this is at the front of the shoulder, this should be nice and snug. Now you see the brake. The brake loop here is a nice straight up and down, and it's snug up against the brake. And the reason for that is if this was back further like this way, and he were to go down a hill, stand up, and he were to go down a hill, he would get a slam. You know, that would, the cart wouldn't be able to come up and hit him, but he would still get, if that was up here, he would get that much motion where he'd feel that, you know, this way, he feels the pressure of the cart leaning on him, but he doesn't get that slam because it's, the loop is snug right up against the brake. So he doesn't get, you know, going faster, slower, going uphill, downhill, he doesn't get that slam. If you have that brake snug, at the same time the tracer, with this push back, the tracer is snug, and this is at the front of the shoulder, you've got them in a nice little box, so they're not gonna, the pulling, the reason for adjusting the equipment this way is to make it safer, more comfortable, and more efficient for the dog to work. If they're working where they're not getting that slam back and forth every time they go up or down a hill, it's obviously going to be more comfortable for them. They're going to be happier working. So that's the reason you want to try to get this fit the best you can for the dog to make them happier, make it more comfortable for them. The traces themselves, like I said, the adjustment you want to make is so that when that shaft's at the front of the shoulder, the brake loop is nice straight up and down, snug up against the brake. When you have that, then you adjust these traces so at that point they're nice and snug. And that is where they're pulling from. Like I said, these straps come back from the neck piece all the way back here to this point where the traces connect, and there's your point of pull. It's pulling right from that neck piece right back to there where they're pulling the weight. You don't want them pulling, if your tracers are too loose, come up. If the traces are loose, they'd actually be pulling. Some people have their loops very, very tight around their shaft, and I have seen dogs actually pulling from this part. The traces are hanging, and the dog's pulling the cart, and it's because this is tight here, and they're actually pulling with this part, which obviously isn't very comfortable for the dog. The part that's around their belly is doing the pulling. So you want to be sure that these traces are nice and snug, and that brake loop is straight up and down, and that's the proper fit for the cart. As I said before, you want to check the balance. Every cart, every type of load you would put in it is different. And the way to check it, honey, just a little more. Come on up. Just a little more, up and down. And you just check right here, the feel. You can feel that, you know, you've got the little bit of weight from the shafts, but if I were to put that back, this would kind of be flinging up. It'd be very high and loose. Or if the weight was too far forward, this would be pushed down, and it would be putting weight across this band across their shoulder. So you need to move the weight around so that you get the shaft so it's nice and light like that. Good boy. You want to show them that? Okay, you go back. Come up. You have to teach your dog a back for draft work. He just kind of really took to it and liked to do it very naturally, which was really nice for me. But what I learned after training several dogs is the day that puppy comes home to your house, every time they back up naturally, give it a word. Tell them that that's back. If you have a narrow pantry and they come in and they have to back out, tell them back, back, back. If they're stuck between the sofa and the coffee table and they back out, tell them back, back, back. Praise them, give them a treat. If you start giving them a word from the time they're a little puppy, every time they do it naturally, then they've learned it. And by the time they're ready to do draft work, they already know the back. So I've learned through several dogs, and now, like with him, when he was real little, I started him right away. Puppy I have at home now, I brought her home a little older. She was about 4.5 months, and I took the little treat out to teach her sit. And first week I got her home, I went to teach her sit. And most dogs, as you all know, I'm sure if you kind of hold it up over their head, they'll look up and sit. Well, I held it up over her head, expecting she'd look up and sit, and instead she went back. And at first I was going, oh no, wait a minute, back, 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 back. So she learned back before she learned sit. So when you can get it naturally, give it a word and train it. It's really, really helpful to have it early on. But that is one command that is different for draft work than any of the other things you do.